Hi, and welcome to Inside Pleasantville School District. I'm Emily Rubin Persons, your host, Board of Ed trustee. You know, while many of our students' education and graduation requirements are determined by the regulations set forth by the State of Education Department, our students do have many choices. There are choices in sports, we have choices in the arts, we have choices in clubs, and we really do have quite a few choices in our academics. Choices, selecting possibilities, and there's the strategy, the plan of action. So here with me today is one of our high school seniors, Julia O'Reilly, to talk about the choices that she's made over the years and how those fit into her strategies of being a high school. Now you're a senior, so welcome to Inside Pleasantville.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm good.
You're in your final stretch of high school, your final stretch of Pleasantville School District.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, it really flew by. These last 4 years have been so fun, but crazy. And everything at the same time.
Unbelievable. So we're in January. We've got 6 months until you walk across that stage.
Yeah.
Do you remember kindergarten?
I remember bits and pieces, but not too much.
Not too much? Okay. How about the first day of middle school, going into that middle school classroom?
That I definitely remember.
Who was your teacher?
I had Mr. Becker. He was there for 1 year.
Oh, right. I remember that name.
I think 1 year it was.
Okay.
And he was great. I was really sad to see him go.
And then how about your first day in high school?
That I definitely remember very clear. Orientation and then that first day.
That whole link crew that they have going. Right. To just make everybody feel good. The day, I think it was like the day before. It was like a whole afternoon of events, right?
I think so, yeah, because I remember they have like all these seniors who you look at the time and you're like, oh my gosh, very intimidating.
They're so experienced and knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And now you are that experienced and knowledgeable person who's ready just about to go on into the yonder.
Yep.
So you've made a lot of choices and you've had a lot of strategies over these years, and your college applications are in and you're waiting to hear, right?
Oh yeah, we're in the middle period where you're stressed because you want to hear it, but you know there's nothing you can do. So all you got to do is wait.
And then you have to choose.
Exactly.
How many schools did you apply to?
It's funny, I saw myself applying to maybe 7 or 8 or maybe even less, just because I figured I'd get a chance to really get to know the schools and narrow it down. But between everything that happened, I ended up applying to I think it was 10 or 11.
Oh, you applied to more then?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So did you do any of the virtual tours so that you could see the campuses online?
I did. They recommend it when you're really interested in schools just to get to know it a little more. So I found that I did some of the live Q&As, which I thought were really helpful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
so you
good.
have either it's an admissions officer and a student or an alumni, and I thought those were really helpful just to get to know the student experience. And then I did some of the virtual tours, which I really enjoyed. I thought they were very
now
helpful.
with technology, I mean, you can really see a lot of what the campuses look like.
Exactly.
And Google Images and all that, Google Maps and all that kind of thing, so you can see the streets and everything, which is a lot of fun. So you chose. I'm going to use strategies and choice and the word choose a lot today. So you chose not to do early decision.
I did, yeah. I found that it is a big financial commitment because a lot of times schools that see that you're willing to commit early decision aren't apt to give you as much financial aid or scholarship just because they know they don't necessarily have to because it's binding.
Right.
So while it is kind of tempting because how nice is it to know the school you're going to go to in that December, but I turned away from it just because I thought it might be easier and then give myself more of a selection since I wasn't really attached to one school.
That's good. That's good. So now you have to wait. Have you heard from any schools yet?
I actually just heard back from Binghamton 2 days ago, which was exciting. That was the first
All right,
one.
So now you know at least you're going to go somewhere.
Exactly.
Right? You got in one, and now you're good, and now hopefully you'll get back some more acceptances so you can make the choice. Yeah, it's hard to decide where these next 4 years are going to be the right place.
Yeah,
right.
It definitely is. I mean, you think about it, and even major-wise and stuff. It's nice that they give you that undecided option. Yeah. Where you don't have to necessarily select it, but just to think you're supposed to know what you want to do with the rest of your life.
It's
at
really
18
hard.
Or 17.
It's really hard. I mean, of course, there's those few that from 7th grade say, "I want to be a nurse," or "I know I want to do something like that." So for the college entrance, did you take the SAT or what was your choice, SAT or ACT?
I actually chose the SAT, and that was actually a big decision because while some people take both,
Yeah.
I found that with COVID and everything, it kind of kept getting pushed back because either dates would get canceled and such. But at first I took a diagnostic to kind of see which one would be a better fit for me.
Oh, that was a good idea.
Yeah, and I found that I've always kind of been a slower test taker, so the SAT gave me a better option to be successful.
Okay.
Because the ACT, it's a good option, but it's very fast-paced, so you kind of have to be quicker.
And is the ACT, now I know, I can't remember, one of my kids took the ACT. Is it that each section has a set time?
Yeah, so I believe both tests do that, but I believe for the ACT, like they have a science section, SAT doesn't have a science section,
Okay.
and then they have the grammar and the math like the SAT
Right,
does.
right.
But for each one, sometimes there's more questions in a shorter amount of time.
Ooh.
So you have to move a little quicker.
So that was your you knew that, so that was a good strategy for you to take
Exactly.
the test. Yeah. Yeah, I have two sons that have already graduated. One took the SAT and the other took the ACT.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that too. They took practice tests to see which one they felt more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that was how they made their decision.
Yeah.
Right. So you're senior class president?
Yes, I am.
That's
It's
fun.
been-
Have you been in student government all the way through middle school?
I have. I didn't go for any of the positions in middle school, but I
Uh-huh.
was part of like the student government, or I forget what they called it back then. But it was basically
fun.
just like a group of kids that came together to make some of the decisions for the school and for your
Right.
class and stuff, which was exciting. And then freshman year, I was the treasurer of our
Oh, okay.
class, and then sophomore year, I went for president. I've been it ever
Okay.
since.
And you've been president ever since?
Yep.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun. It's nice to kind of be in that position where you can help make decisions that you think everyone will like and things like that.
And keep in touch with having the relationship with the principal
Yeah.
is a really nice thing.
Definitely.
You
He's
know,
really
to get
great.
comfortable talking with, a lot of kids don't have that much exposure talking to authority figures, so to have
Yeah.
that is a nice benefit for future, because talking to your teachers in college is going to be really important.
Exactly.
To stay connected. They don't get to see you as much, so you have to make that extra effort to
Exactly.
connect.
Yeah.
And talk about some of your classes. Now, you were sharing before that you were in a pretty competitive course load
Yes.
over these years, which was, a strategy, I guess, but also a choice, because I'm assuming you thrive on that competition within yourself.
That's definitely it. Like for me, like I definitely try not to compare myself to other people. It's tough sometimes because you kind of get caught up in that whirlwind.
Well, you're in the same kids. I mean, I would imagine some of these kids you've been with over the years.
Exactly. It's like that same kind of group of people that travels
Right.
all together, class to class. But
Right.
yeah, it was definitely a decision for me because I like to think that when I challenge myself, I perform at my best. So
Right.
by being in these higher level classes, it's kind of my decision to choose a path that's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it
Right.
in the long term. And that's kind of what my decision was.
Right, and that little friendly competition, for some, can be healthy and motivating. It's
Yeah.
like, oh wait, I know I can do just as well. So let me, one of my sons had a competition with one of his friends during school, and that was really helpful for him. But now you're also an athlete.
Yes. So I play soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and lacrosse in the spring.
Okay. So you're an athlete, you're a scholar, and you're on the, various clubs. So how do you keep that all together? That's a lot of work that you have to do. So how do you keep that all together?
So it's funny, it's almost like the busier my schedule, the more organized I force myself to be, which has
Right.
always kind of been a tactic of mine because I find that, I also want to do the fun things. I want to hang out with my friends and I want to go
Right.
to games and stuff like that. So
Right.
I kind of give myself incentive using those things to make myself have to be organized. Like, okay, I have to get this done by a certain time if I want to do this other
Right,
thing. So
right.
it's busy and it's a lot going on, but I find that almost like keeps me from procrastinating because you really can't allow yourself to if you're going to keep up.
So much discipline.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, do you have like a set planner that you always use? Do you use a phone? Like, what's your system for keeping track of all the things you need to keep track of?
So for big things, I use the reminder app on my phone because I find that
Oh.
it's nice because it's like
So you remind yourself.
exactly.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like it'll pop up on your like front screen every
Sure.
time you open it. So it's like, all right, PCTV interview thing
Okay.
at 12:30.
So is that kind of like the Google Calendar?
Yeah, very similar, very similar. Some
Okay.
people prefer the Google Calendar, and I like to use both, but the
Okay.
reminder app is the one I use a lot.
Huh.
And then a lot of it for me is just like old-fashioned Post-it notes. Like I have this one little office space, especially for the online learning, that I use, and it's just covered in like yellow Post-it notes everywhere.
All
and
over the place.
Colored pens and everything like that.
Right. Do you do like a Post-it calendar on the wall where you put things out, or you just have them random?
A lot of it's random. Sometimes I'll keep it more scheduled if I have a lot going on.
Right.
But then other than that, it's like, all right, over here, over here, over here, over here.
So that's a little scattered, but I guess you need that because that way when your eyes are all looking around,
Exactly.
it's a little organized chaos.
Definitely.
Did anybody teach you that?
I mean, my parents always used like calendars. Like when we were younger, we had like this big calendar for like whether it was like a CCD that
Right,
night,
like the family center.
Exactly. So
Right.
you'd have like the little like the little like push pins and Post-its everywhere. So I think that's where a lot of it came from, and it was
Right.
just like that method of organization I kind of got accustomed to.
Well, that's great because, having this kind of scheduling ability will help you next year because you may not be as busy because you may not be on all the sport. You don't know what next year will be with
Exactly.
all the different clubs, but having some of those systems into place is really great.
Yeah.
Wow. What has been some of the favorite things that you've done in like the clubs in the school? Like what, looking back?
I have to say I've always had so much joy for sports, whether it was like just being part of the team or the accomplishment. So like my junior year, so last year we won the state championship in soccer, which was
exciting.
so exciting. It's almost like these same girls I've been playing with for years. It was like that was like not the end because we had another season this year, but that was like the pinnacle of like everything we could have ever accomplished. It was always just like a far off dream, and then it kind of just became this reality, and it was incredible.
Wow. Did you start playing soccer when everybody else did at the age of 4?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. My mom was my ASO coach, and along with a few of our other parents, and it was back when we could barely kick a ball, but we just had fun being out there and running around.
That's amazing. So, back to your classes. So the one thing that impressed me is that you were able to take the competitive classes in both categories, the sciences and the math and the humanities.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that. My son was more of the humanities. He wasn't a science guy. So taking AP science, anything is definitely not a good strategy for him. So you were able to manage both sides of that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I feel like I've always enjoyed the humanities aspect of it. So English mostly. Social studies I've always enjoyed enough, but English is always where my passion was, especially for writing. And then the arts, which is kind of its own category in a way. I've just always loved drawing and just kind of allowing that to be a creative outlet. That's been another way that I've been able to manage all the stress. And then
That's good. It's good that you know that.
Exactly. And then whereas on the other side of the spectrum, you have math and science. And science is always one I've liked a lot, especially biology. That's like what I intend to major in college. So
okay.
I'm
And your art,
passionate about it.
there's a lot of art in math and sciences.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely funny enough. There's definitely that creative side of that too. And then math-wise, I've always been, I struggled with it when I was younger, but I've had really great teachers and tutors that have helped me. And because of that, I was kind of able to end up on that accelerated track. And so up until this year, I was kind of in like that highest, like, I don't really know exactly how to describe it, but it's kind of like the highest level classes.
Okay.
And so I was in AP Calc BC this year at the beginning of the year. But then, and while it was a great challenge, I enjoyed it, I think I definitely struggled last year with that back half of the year where learning was all very different.
So hard.
Yeah, so I found that I was kind of lacking some of those foundational elements that would have really helped me to be successful.
Right.
So I kind of took a step back, and I was just sitting in class one day, and I was like, look, I love my teacher, and I love the relationships that I've gotten to acquire and cultivate because I took this class. But at the end of the day, like I have to put myself and like my mental health first, and I can't just keep like putting myself in that position where I'm not going to be successful, yet I work really hard. So I kind of stepped back and I was like, look, even though I love these elements of the class itself is just very difficult for me to manage. So I stepped back and I ended up taking the class, I guess it's like one step down, AP Calc AB, which it was perfect because it allowed me to
It's still a competitive class, but it fit your whatever, it gave you the ability to balance better.
Exactly, and it allowed me to kind of go back to those foundational elements I was lacking and fine-tune them so I could really capitalize my understanding.
Well, that's, that takes a lot of self-perception.
Yeah.
And confidence.
Yeah.
And obviously you got that from your folks, and hopefully you got that from the school. I know, we want our students to be as competitive as they personally can.
Yes.
You never want to go too far out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You want to go to a little bit. You want to get a little bit to the edge because then it's exciting and it's like, oh, what are the possibilities out there?
Yeah.
But if you're a little too, like you just explained, if you're a little too far out, then it's like, okay, this is not going to work for me.
Exactly.
And having the support around you to say, yeah, you know what, let's balance it out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the big thing is like when you find yourself on this accelerated track all the time, you kind of think to yourself, there's this misconception that it's like, okay, if you drop it, then you're not as good, or maybe then, like, what are you saying about your self-worth and stuff like that? And
Right.
it's kind of, it was just this moment of understanding for me when I was just thinking, and I was like, look, I don't want this, I don't like this,
That's
and
right.
I'm not going to put myself through it.
Absolutely. There's no reason to.
Yep.
There's, and you stayed within a competitive arena.
Absolutely.
But it was just a sidestep over that was able to allow you to enjoy the other things that you're doing, the sports and the other classes and your class presidency and just being a senior.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, it's the best time of your life, really.
Absolutely.
You're in that glory moment
Yeah.
of being a senior. It's really, I remember my senior year very well, and it's a lot of fun because it's all these kids that you've grown up with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, looking back, it's like if I could tell my younger self now.
That was my question. I was going to ask you perfectly. What would you tell yourself?
I would definitely say, I would just say enjoy it. I mean, looking at it now and looking back on this 12 or 13-year journey that I've been on with these kids I've known since forever,
Right.
I really don't think there's going to be anything like it. And so when I look at it, there's going to be struggles, and there was definitely tough times, no doubt,
Right.
but I just couldn't really let that determine my outlook on the entire experience
Right.
because it really is something special.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think we kind of covered, you made a lot of choices in the sports and in the clubs that you've taken, and we didn't talk. Is there any club that you want to give a shout out? Like people need to know about this one little club that they don't really know about, or because there's so many clubs that are kind of funny. Mr. Palumbo really enjoys letting people open up new clubs.
Yeah, that's the awesome thing. I mean, I don't know if there'd be one club in particular. I do yearbook, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
And then I do human rights action. And the nice thing about them is they're a lot less work intensive. So there will be like these sporadic times when you really have to like put in a lot of effort.
Right.
But there's also times when you get to lay back and like it's not too big a commitment, which is nice.
And most of the clubs are held during like 10th period, so it's not like you have to come back to the school at 7 o'clock at night or something like that. It's kind of part of your day, and then you can still do your sports.
Exactly. That was the huge thing for me because I kind of had to be able to balance. I didn't want it to be too much.
Sure.
And the sports is definitely a commitment in itself.
Oh my gosh,
So to
yes.
have these ones that are a little bit less of a commitment is nice.
Right. That's great. All right. Well, thank you, Julia, for joining me here today, talking about your strategies and choices as a Pleasantville student. And you've got some very big choices coming up, very big decision. But listening to everything that you've already talked about, I have a feeling with you and your parents, you're definitely going to make the right decision.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to give us a broader perspective of our students, I'm pleased to welcome Joyce Connel, our coordinator of school counseling. I had to look at my paper to get that's a tumble of it's a right. Joyce has been our school counselor in Pleasantville for 23 years. Wow. And you have definitely been at the table with our students and families, helping them make their choices in their high school, actually starting from 8th grade.
Yes.
In all their things that they're thinking about in their high school path. And over these 23 years, you've definitely seen a lot of changes in the trends.
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting. While some things have remained the same, there are nuances that do seem to change, and more recently, I would say almost yearly.
Wow.
State Education Department has made a lot of changes in the last few years in terms of testing requirements and graduation requirements.
Right.
And so that has also kept us on our toes in terms of different cohorts of students, because we could have freshmen with one set of criteria and seniors with another.
Oh, right.
So, yeah.
So you have to constantly be juggling all of those. Wow.
Yeah. And
That's hard.
Keeping an eye on the different requirements and the different state requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
What would be one of, can you give me one example?
Sure. So not too long ago, although there were 4 years of social studies always required,
Right.
it was not required that it be Global 9 and 10. So we
Okay.
taught Global 9 and 10 as part of our curriculum.
Just because that's what Pleasantville chose to do.
Because that was, yeah,
Okay.
and it was well, it also supported the Regents exams that the student would take.
Okay.
So the state required the exam, but didn't require the course.
Okay, that's a
So-
typical state education
Yeah,
thing.
it was interesting. So if a student would come from another state, for example, and maybe they took a course called, African American Studies, we would just give them the credit for that and not have them take Global 9.
Okay.
Unfortunately now, we have to have them take Global 9 and Global 10. So if a student comes from another state or another country where
Right.
they may have a social studies course, it could be called ethics, it could
Okay.
be called religion and
Ooh.
American history or something. We can't give them the required credit in that course. It could become an elective credit.
Okay.
But they do have to take Global 9 and Global 10. Another
That's
piece to
interesting.
that is the exam itself used to be a 2-year studies exam.
Right.
Now it's based on just the Global 10 curriculum.
Okay.
So we've seen a lot of changes with the
Wow.
exams. We've
Right.
seen the English exam, for example, had gone from a 1-hour exam to a 3-hour exam
Ooh.
to back to, not a 1-hour exam, a 1-day exam to a 2-day exam, now back to the 1-day exam.
2-day exam.
Yeah, it was a 2-day exam. The
Wow.
students.
I don't remember any of my kids taking a 2-day exam.
Yeah, and the challenge with that one was also, believe it or not, the weather, because we used to give our exam in January, and oftentimes we'd have a snowstorm in the middle of it. So if the student took part 1 of the exam, and then the next day we had a snowstorm, the exam became.
So the exam was in January?
We used to give it in January.
I don't even
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah, quite
That
some
must have been
time
a
ago.
while ago.
Yeah, so 23 years, you see
Yeah.
quite a lot of
Right.
changes. Some,
Right.
just are, minor, and others are a little bit more,
Wow.
involved.
That's amazing. And then, with us in Pleasantville, I know when we had a big increase in our school electives, when Dan McCann was the interim principal, that, my son was in high school then, and we had very few electives, and he wasn't an artist, so there wasn't a lot to choose from. And then, from that student government meeting, we've really, since then, have expanded a tremendous number of our electives, which is really from the military history and more art classes. I mean, my one
STEM.
son the STEM classes. My son's taking digital art right now, and that's a lot of fun. And you were mentioning we have a new, several new, like this AP seminar class.
Yes, so we've actually this year added 3 new courses that we'll be offering to our students in the spring for next year,
Okay.
when they meet with us in the spring for course selections. So there's an AP seminar class, which will be part of the English department offerings. It's a course that students will be able to focus more on critical thinking and analysis of topics, and they'll do some research. It'll be a year-long
That
course.
sounds yummy.
And it's an opportunity.
For some people. For
Right.
other people, they may say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But
Yeah, so it's aside from their other program where they do more of the literature, the
Yeah.
writing, this is more research and focused on areas of
great.
interest to them.
That's great.
And in social studies, we're offering 2 classes through SUPA, which is the Syracuse University Dual Enrollment Program. And that allows students to get credit in both Pleasantville High School and receive a Syracuse University transcript.
Oh, that's nice.
And those courses are African American Studies, which would be a
That's
full
great.
year course for our social studies. And then there's another course for a half-year elective called Gender Studies.
Oh, that's great.
So women in gender studies. So
oh, these are 2 really
yes.
nice.
Yeah. And very
classes to add
timely in terms of what we're
Absolutely.
seeing in the world.
Absolutely. So that's really great. And then we have the research project classes, the humanities and the science, and all the APs. Now, I was talking with Julia O'Reilly, our high school senior. She's a very competitive student. She has a pretty heavy course load. I have more diverse students myself, so they took a handful of AP classes. What do you see as kind of the typical balance that, I mean, is there a typical balance of classes that students take? Of courses that students take?
Typical is a difficult word because it makes it sound like it's more common. I would say there are definitely variations within what students choose. More often than not, if a student starts out in the 9th and 10th grade taking accelerated and honors courses, they will continue with that pathway.
Right.
So there are some seniors that have a heavy senior AP load.
Right.
Then we have that mix of students who maybe didn't start out in that trajectory but have gradually increased their rigor and may choose to take courses in a handful of areas. And then we have those students who like to specialize. So they're really focused on maybe the STEM courses or the humanities courses or the art and musics,
they go
AP
heavy
courses.
that way.
So it really depends on the individual student.
Right, because to be a good student is requires a lot of skills. You know, you've got to stay on top of your classes, and you've got to make sure you don't fall behind, and follow the directions and do the projects accordingly. So for some of our 9th graders, they're very far ahead, but for some of our 9th graders, they're emerging students.
Right.
So I love that Pleasantville is a open enrollment for the AP classes. One of my sons took only 2 AP classes, and that was perfect balance for him. And he went on to a successful college career, but he was not ready for an honors in 9th grade.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it's skill, but it's also interest. So I can recall a
critical
student,
word. I love the word interest, because if there's no interest.
Right. You might want to take something that's challenging, or sometimes students believe that having an AP course in and of itself makes your transcript strong.
Right.
So, but I do recall a student many years ago who had a very intense interest in U.S. history. I mean, I guess since he was a little boy, he just had so much knowledge and information. Nothing else really in school, captured him. And he did so well in American history, and so he did take the AP course. So the open enrollment has allowed for that opportunity, where in the past, a student such as that might not have been eligible.
Right.
Because overall his grades might not have allowed him that opportunity. So that opened doors in so many ways for students.
Yeah, because, as I opened with, so much of the education curriculum, the requirements are chosen for our students, kindergarten through 8th grade. This is what you're taking. Right. And it's hard to find that interest for some of the kids. They're not necessarily motivated just to do well. They're motivated by a particular subject, and if they only get that for a very small window of time, it can be hard. So I do love that we now have much more electives for the 9th graders coming in, because they can find that passion.
Right.
I mean, from the marine biology to, we have so many different electives and clubs. I mean, Mr. Palumbo is so great with all the clubs. I mean, I don't know, do we still have Quidditch? Is that still there?
I don't know if that's popular this year.
But there's the
but
Frisbee.
They flex in and out. Yes. Every year there's something new.
Yeah.
Sometimes the older ones come off. Sometimes they come back.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about Pleasantville, that we do things because the students bring it to our attention. Whether it be courses, whether it be activities, they're so involved in helping us make decisions and really being part of the school policies and programs.
Yeah,
which is
that
important.
is my mantra. I mean, we love that. It's, I mean, because what are we here for?
Exactly.
We're here for the kids, I mean, if, we want Pleasantville to be a strong school for a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, our kids have to feel good here.
Right.
And take programs that make them feel balanced.
Right, and successful.
I mean, that Julia definitely highlighted that. She realized in one of the classes that she was taking, it just really wasn't the right fit for her. And as much as she is competitive and all of that, she realized, wait a minute, I need to take a step back. And she shifted to a different class that, because she's an athlete, she's in clubs, she's very, very involved, and we have students involved in so many different ways that you do have to balance it.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I believe that when the counselors sit with the students to talk about courses, that really becomes the focus of our discussion is, well, how do you spend your time? What are the things that you value?
Right.
Because we have to think about not just the 7-hour day in school.
Right.
There's after-school responsibilities at home. There might be a job. There could also be, like you said, sports and activities. And so it's being able to help them understand how their management of their time will also impact their success in those classes and their ability to really connect.
Because you don't want a student taking an overload of classes and then being up until 2 o'clock in the morning every day just to keep track, just to keep on it.
Right.
That's not balance. You want to have fun with your friends. You want the chill time.
Right.
And some kids don't know. I mean, some kids I know, like in 6th grade, you have to reach a certain grade point average in order to get into the advanced math class. So one of my neighbors, and you don't know that right away. And again, emerging students, you start out at the beginning of 6th grade, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I really do like math. And so I know one student, one of my neighbors, she ended up working really hard with a tutor so that she could be comfortable getting into that advanced math class in middle school. And Mrs. Osowski was very, concerned, but she was a math major in college. So, there you go. But it is really important to, participate in all the different things. I mean, my son was an actor, so that for him was just like, he loved that whole thing. Julia talked about the sports and how important that is for her. And then you have some kids who do like the Daily Panther every day, and you see that whole, remember when, Cullen Durgans and his brother were doing that.
Their little skit.
Oh my God, I loved that. I loved that. So, there are a lot of choices, and there's a strategy or a big picture that's kind of hard, right?
It's interesting. What we try to do when we sit with our students is really talk about goal setting. Goal setting in the immediate, midterm, and certainly long term. So one of the experiences we do with our freshmen on the very first day of school is we ask them to write a letter to themselves that they will open in their senior year.
Oh, wow.
And we ask them to talk to themselves about, what they have set as their long-term goal.
Can't imagine what my kids would have said to themselves.
And it's interesting because when we give them back the letter and they open it up, a lot of the students get this really sense of excitement and pride because, 4 years ago, which to them was an eternity, they said, I want to be the lead in the play, or I really want to improve my English, or I'm looking forward to going to college. And they're like, oh my gosh, this really happened.
This really happened for me.
And, or, hey, oh wow, I thought I was going to go out for student government. That never happened, But I think it's helpful. It helps them think about the fact that goals really are real. And that
they're personal.
Yes,
that's the hardest thing I would imagine for the counselors when you sit down with your students and you see maybe they're making a choice because of what their friends are doing that might not necessarily be the best choice for them, or what's the bigger toughie is when, unfortunately we all know as parents, our children don't always have the same values and goals that we have for them.
Sure.
So I'm sure you've seen a few where the parent is saying, you must do this, and the kid is like, yeah, but I really want to do that. And that's a tough one.
Yeah, and sometimes we help with that, and most particularly with college selection. Sometimes there'll be a discussion about a student wanting to go far from home and the family wanting to keep them close, or, financially there are boundaries that the family needs to be responsible to, and the student wants to go and feels they've worked so hard.
And they want to spend, go to the most expensive school ever. Yeah,
so, that really is, I think, a good service that we can help provide, where we can be that go-between, where we can help them think about, the pros and cons to both of their choices, and how can we find a middle path.
It's really, and we're in such a strange time right now. I just, actually last night I listened to the webinar on the gap year program. There was a gap year, what's it called, virtual event. And so I listened to that. It was about a half an hour. And, when my older son was in 10th, 11th grade, that was, I learned about the gap year, and it was really it wasn't as well put together as this event, let's put it this way. But, they really have come a long way in options for students. And something that I didn't realize is that the gap year is not just like the entire year. The gap year programs could be a semester or just even a few weeks over the summer.
Yeah.
And listening to the statistics that she provided and I can see this because not everybody's ready, right, to start out. And also in this crazy time of the pandemic, it might not, for some people, they think, well, why do I want to go and sit in a room, or maybe I'm going to stay home. So the gap year is interesting, to live abroad or even to do something right nearby and open up a different mindset as to what some of the possibilities are.
There are some colleges will also offer students a January admissions, and so there's the question of what do I do with that first semester,
right?
And so some of our students we've seen use those gap year programs to take advantage of whether it be a travel experience, a service experience, or even a credit-bearing experience, where you can get both.
She mentioned that that was actually one of the points on the slide. Princeton and Tufts and
I think University of Rochester.
I can't remember. There were like 4 or 5 of them that she had on her slide that provides scholarship for the gap year, for that time. And I know that some schools, Boston University has it, Middlebury has it, where it helps them with just their residential placement. They kind of want students to not show up right away because of the way that they keep kids going, and that way it keeps the student dorms full, but not over full. What else can we talk about here with all the things that students have to, there's a lot that we have for kids, and I think Mr. Palumbo has been so great, and the counselor, I know our counselor, our family counselor, we get the same counselor for the family as you go, so it's not
the students counselor.
Right, the students counselor. I mean, you really form a nice relationship, and she really kind of knows us, and it's been really helpful because she gets who I am, she gets my husband, and therefore she's able to work with my 2 sons and that's really been helpful.
Yeah, we've done that for as long as I've been in Pleasantville, working with families. There are many schools that do things by alphabet or by grade level and so forth, and we've always had this tradition of keeping families because of the smallness of our community. And it's a wonderful experience, especially when we've seen families that have children over a span of many years.
Yeah.
And so, you may have started with a family back in, maybe 2015, and, here we are 2021, and their second is coming in, and then soon will be their third, So it's sometimes very long relationships that we have, and, they become part of our lives too.
No, it's true, and it helps because there are so many choices, and there is, do I take the honors class or not, or do I take this AP class? And when you have that relationship with your counselor, it's helpful because she can see, well, look, you did really well. We're here to support you. So if you want to go for it, let's go for it. Or maybe you want to choose to do this AP seminar or choose to take some of the art, because we now have so many art classes. So it's there's a lot of decisions. I like that.
One of the things that I think that's helpful for us as counselors too is that we rely so much on the teacher input as well.
Yeah.
So we will always ask the teachers to provide us with their best recommendation.
Right.
And then we can sit with the student and say, what are your thoughts about this?
Right.
This is where they're thinking, but are you willing to take on that risk, or do you think you want to go in another direction?
Right.
So it's a good starting point for a conversation. It also allows the family, to talk about it too.
Right.
To say, hey, what do you think about, challenging yourself and maybe going into this direction? So we rely very heavily on the teachers' recommendations, and we do, involve the parents, should they want to, in the process as well. So it's not just an individualized conversation with the student. It really sometimes becomes a more broader conversation.
Because it's their whole development.
Right.
It's not just like, should I take this English class or that English class?
Right.
It's all of it combined together, and
it's progressive. I think that first year that we meet with students, there really is very little option for them, as you mentioned,
Right.
because there are so many core required courses.
Right.
So, they might start out with maybe, a web page design class or, an animation course.
Right.
And then the next year they realize, I really enjoyed those tech courses,
Right.
and they're able to then expand on it. Or we might look at their transcript and see where there were some dips or some really surges,
Right.
where we could say, hey,
Yeah.
what do you think about
Right.
doing something else? Or we were able to then start saying, what about the future?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? We're juniors now. What are we talking about
Right.
in terms of next year and beyond? Would you like to take some
Right.
classes that are going to have more meaning and purpose for you, whether it be pursuing that major in college
And
or
just
looking at a
to-
specific school?
For their curiosity.
Right.
Like we have the opportunity to tap into that curiosity, and that's important because
Yeah.
you just don't. My older son took the AP environmental class when he was a senior, and that was it. He was an environmental major in college, and
Wow.
and that's his. It was pivotal for him.
It's interesting you say that. I remember many, many years ago, there was a mom came in to me to say, I really want my son to get more involved in service. He doesn't have enough service
Right.
experience. And he was, I think at the time, maybe a first semester senior. And I was like, well, we could talk about it. I don't. So what we chose together with the student is that he was going to go over to Bedford Road and start working with the students to help them
Oh,
with
okay.
tutoring, because he was a very
Sure.
strong math student. And Mom got in touch with me about maybe 2 or 3 years later when he was graduating college, and she said, I want to let you know that he is a math teacher. He's graduating, he's going on to become a math teacher, and that experience
Right.
in that semester, and this was prior to us doing the internship that we
Right,
have
right.
right now. And so sometimes even a small experience,
Absolutely.
a momentary opportunity can really be life-changing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they're just fun.
Well, and that's part of it, is to take those chances and see where it goes,
Right.
because we're complicated people. We have lots of facets to us.
Right.
We're like diamonds,
Yeah.
right? We have many facets to us. So, okay, well, we're kind of out of time here.
Oh, okay.
Any closing thoughts? I think we kind of covered all. We could sit here for another 3
We
hours
probably
talking about
could. We
students
probably could.
and life in Pleasantville and beyond. But
The only message I would like to leave with people is that, please reach out to the counselors. If there's any questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, suggestions.
Right.
Or even just, hi.
Yeah, no, I agree.
We are there. We really do want to work with the families
Right.
and help students.
Right.
And, that's where we find our best joy.
yeah, and the website, your pages are really great because you show the everything that happens in the 4 years, which I love.
Thank you.
A lot of good information.
Great.
So,
Thank you for the opportunity.
yes, absolutely. So I want to thank Julia O'Reilly and Joyce Connel for taking the time today with me on Inside Pleasantville Schools. It's a big world out there, and as a parent and a Board of Ed trustee, I am really glad that Pleasantville is able to provide so many choices to our students so that they can really tap into their own curiosity and their own needs and see where it's going to take them. So please, thank you very much for joining us today, and look to our next edition of Inside Pleasantville Schools. Have a great day.